Hello and welcome to iCatholic. I'm Wendy Grace. On the 6th of February, the earthquake that devastated so many homes and took so many lives in Syria and Turkey, we're still feeling the after effects of that, and so much work is happening on the ground in these places, but so much more needs to be done. Joined with us in studio to tell us a little bit about the work that Trócaire is doing in this regard in terms of the response, I have with us the CEO of Trócaire, Caoimhe de Barra. Caoimhe, thanks for joining us today. It's hard to really comprehend just the devastation and the loss of life that this earthquake has caused. Tell us a little bit about what you're hearing from your partners on the ground in Syria and Turkey.
So Trócaire works in Syria with Caritas Syria, and what we're hearing is that there is utter devastation. Even the workers in Caritas Syria, because they come from the communities that were affected, are still not living in any kind of permanent shelter. People are still living in cars. People are afraid of tremors, so people are not going back indoors out of fear. So you can imagine the kind of trauma that this is causing, especially to children and young people. In Syria, even prior to the earthquakes, there were huge issues and problems in terms of shortage of food, clean water, electricity, power, medicines as a result of the conflict that continues in the region.
I mean, this is a country, Caoimhe, that has been experiencing war for many years. They were already in such a vulnerable and dire situation. And
that's right. That's right. And so the people living in northwestern Syria, many of them had been displaced many times over, and many of them had lost their homes or had had the homes that they had in northwest Syria shelled and destroyed, at least in part. So this is just layering trauma and devastation upon previous trauma and devastation. It's really hard to imagine how people survive psychologically, not to mention physically, after a shock like this on top of the war. So what we are doing, what we have been doing from the very first day following the earthquake, is supporting our local partners to deliver immediate assistance. And of course, in the first week after the earthquake, the focus was on ensuring that anybody who could be brought alive from the rubble was rescued. But then very quickly it turns to, well, what happens to those who have survived? And the unfortunate fact around devastation at this scale, especially in a conflict area, is that the supplies of water have been damaged and the supplies of electricity have been damaged. So cholera and the risk of other waterborne diseases or infectious diseases is now extremely high. So we're very concerned that there'll be a second wave of deaths that will follow the initial wave of deaths that killed more than 50,000 people. And that is a result of health and health hazards. But also, it's a very harsh winter environment there, and people are extremely vulnerable, especially children and old people. So we're concerned that we haven't seen the end of the immediate impact. So life-saving assistance is what we're focusing on. But we will then have to turn to, well, how do we make sure that people find somewhere safe to live and that you can get children back into a safe educational environment? Because experience has shown that you need to give children an environment within which they feel safe as quickly as possible so that they can feel a sense of normality and to reduce the trauma and the long-term effect of that.
That sense of stability. And as you say, Caoimhe, I know you've touched on obviously the work you're doing with Caritas and that immediate response where people were being and are still being housed in churches, halls, all these sorts of places. Where do they go now? What's going to happen next with the rebuilding effort?
Well, the rebuilding will take an awful long time, especially in Syria. So what we're likely to see, unfortunately, is people living in tents or living in other temporary shelter for quite a period of time. We have seen this over many years in Lebanon, where many Syrian refugees have spent 12 years living in tented camps. Obviously, that is far from satisfactory, but what our priority is to make sure that where people are accommodated, it's safe for children, it's safe for women, it's safe for everyone, that people have the kind of winter equipment that they need, so blankets and heaters.
Because it's freezing there.
So cold. And these things are absolutely fundamental. We also need to make sure that there is a sustainable supply of food and all of the kinds of food that people need for their nutrition and access to medicines and healthcare and purification of water and water systems. Those things are just incredibly important. But the scale of the work is huge. But what I have to say is that local organisations like Caritas Syria are inevitably the first responders. It's always faster and it's always, most effective when local responders are supported.
Yeah, because they're local, they know where to go to get the supplies that they need. And is that an important point to make, Caoimhe? Because I know in the kind of initial few days after the earthquake, Irish people are incredible, and all over different WhatsApp groups and social media, people were trying to see, what can I do? And, there was various drives for blankets and coats. And I know even in my own local parish that happened, and then there was a message saying we're full, we can't take anymore. Is it practical resources on the ground that's needed now? I mean, what should we be doing that can help in the most immediate and effective way?
Well, people's generosity really is unparalleled here in Ireland, and I suppose the impulse to send people things that you can visibly see they need is very, very strong. But really it's cash, it's really financial donations. So if you imagine that it is very hard even for us to get food supplies and other non-food items which are essential, like basic hygiene supplies, into the areas, the idea of trying to ship goods from Ireland or any other European country to an area that has been affected by conflict and earthquakes in Syria, it simply does not make sense. There are markets in Syria.
And there's a cost of that as well,
the cost is huge.
Stuff there. Yeah.
The cost is huge, and what we really need is money, so financial donations, no matter how large or small, so that our local partners can procure those goods which are available in local markets and get them to people much faster.
And supporting the economy as well.
That's right, yeah. And that is very important. So those local businesses need to be kept operating so people have access to goods and services. And it's much cheaper, faster, more efficient for us to be able to buy blankets and food and other items locally and give them to people extremely quickly, rather than, that we understand people's impulse, it's very positive, shipping goods from Ireland to Syria does not make any sense.
Well, I think that so many people watching will continue to have a heart for the situation there and be very generous. Caoimhe, thank you so much for joining us today on iCatholic. And of course, you can give on the website for Trócaire, which is trócaire.org, and that's where you'll be able to also see much more of what myself and Caoimhe have been talking about in terms of the immediate need in Syria and Turkey in the aftermath of that earthquake. Thanks so much for joining us on iCatholic today. Please make sure that you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.